Hi, my name is Nagin. I'm with the United Nations Foundation, and I'm thrilled to introduce Randi Zuckerberg, Mandy Moore, and Derrick Ashong to the Social Good Summit. Today's session is being broadcast around the world as we speak on Facebook. Please tune in your computers and your mobiles to facebook.com/nothing-but-nets, not nuts, nets. Nothing But Nets is a global grassroots campaign to save lives by preventing malaria in Africa. And in the spirit of the Social Good Summit, the session is completely interactive, and we encourage you to submit questions about today's topic. Please join me in welcoming these champions in the fight against malaria to the stage. Note, the way that you can submit questions is just to tweet something. Randi has the iPad here with her, and if you tweet something and you put hashtag social good, she will get it and be able to see your questions. Right here.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm so excited that we're here hosting this interactive town hall on malaria. We have a great panel, so I'm just going to do a few quick opening remarks and then immediately start throwing it to questions. We're here today to talk about a disease that has killed millions of people around the world, but I'm also excited to talk about the fact that we are so close to ending malaria within the next 5 years. Two people here who are very passionate about raising awareness and activism around malaria. We have Mandy Moore, just returned from Cameroon. I'm sure everyone in this audience knows Mandy Moore, singer, actress, philanthropist. And Derrick Ashong, personality, TV host. You can see him on Al Jazeera's The Stream. So I'm thrilled to have Mandy and Derrick joining us today. Many of us in this room don't remember when malaria used to affect the United States, and malaria to many of us feels like a very distant disease, something that affects families in Africa but doesn't affect us personally. Until last year, in my case, my husband just graduated from business school, and during his business school time, one of his classmates went on a typical trip. Lots of people travel through business school. Went to Ghana, came through Egypt, through London. In London, he fell ill. They treated him for dehydration. They treated him for the flu. They did not know to look for malaria. It wasn't something that people in London come down with. By the time his plane landed in the US, he had passed away. And it was at that moment that I realized that malaria isn't just an issue that's affecting people in Africa. It's affecting all of us because we're such a wired global group of people with easy access to travel and access to information. It is right here in our backyards, and it's really up to us to do something about it. So this is an interactive chat. As they mentioned, I'm following the hashtag for social good so that I can take questions both from everyone watching on the live stream and from people in the audience. I also have gathered a few questions that people have posted in advance on the Facebook page. So you can also post your questions on facebook.com/nothingbutnets or the Twitter handle nothingbutnets. Finally, I just wanted to talk a little bit about my own participation with the United Nations Foundation Global Entrepreneurs Council. It's a group of 10 people from the United States, 10 entrepreneurs who come together to use technology and all of the different groups that we're working with in order to pick one issue and affect change. We have chosen malaria and nothing but nets. And we've chosen it because we're kind of tech geeks. We like things that are measurable, things that anyone can participate in. And with malaria, it's $10 bed net for a family. You can save an entire family. And it's something that anyone from students to CEOs can participate in. So without further ado, I'd love to just throw out some of the questions that were previously sent in to us on Facebook and Twitter. Mandy, what inspired you to join the movement to end malaria, and why do you think it's so important for people to get involved?
Oh, good question. Thank you so much for having us, for hosting this. This is such a A lovely thing to be a part of. I have been a global ambassador for PSI, Population Services International, for the last few years, a global health organization, and mainly focusing on their child survival programs, which malaria obviously falls under. And through them, I sort of partnered up with the Nothing But Nets campaign and have traveled now to the Central African Republic, and like you just mentioned, just got back from Cameroon a few weeks ago. Both situations, both countries, we traveled there to sort of oversee these massive countrywide net distributions that were happening. And in Cameroon, specifically, it's an incredibly historic campaign. I think 8.6 million nets are going to be distributed over the coming year.
And we have a net that we're going to open
yes,
it up
we have,
at some point.
We have a net sitting here next to us. So it was an interesting trip for us as well. I traveled with a bipartisan congressional delegation, which gave it a little bit of a different tone. But it was almost as if we were looking under the hood of a car to see how a distribution really works from the top down, because the distribution wasn't starting until after we left. So we met with everyone from government officials. We were able to meet with the Prime Minister, to meeting community health workers, to visiting orphanages, visiting local villages, and actually talking to people who were going to be recipients of the nets. I remember this woman stuck with me. We met this woman, Madame Ngano, in this village of Ibanga outside of Yaoundé, the capital of Cameroon. And she invited us into her home, and she had her little grandson sitting on her knee, and she was a very stoic woman. And I remember sort of, once we started talking about the campaign and why we were there and the distribution that was going to be happening, it was like watching her face sort of slowly, just this sort of stoic expression fade. And she talked about how peaceful she would be knowing that her grandson would be able to sleep under this net and to be protected, and that she wouldn't have to worry about him anymore. And I remember asking before we left what her dream for her grandson was, and she said for him to be healthy, as if like there wasn't anything else that she could dream outside of that. And it just really stuck with me, because it seems like part of the human beings, that's something that we should never even have to think
People
about.
Take for granted,
yeah, exactly. We absolutely take for granted. I don't know, I digress. I could go off on a tangent about it, but it was one of the things that really stuck with me, and why I'm so proud to be a part of these kinds of campaigns and the work that Nothing But Nets does, and to continue to raise awareness of malaria and the great work that's being done. And obviously we still have a long way to go, but on that note, the United Nations Foundation's Nothing But Nets campaign has committed to sending 225,000 nets to Cameroon for that particular distribution, and I believe they've reached that goal. They're halfway there. Awesome. And now we're sort of imploring people to log on to nothingbutnets.net, and for $10 to send a net and save a life to the Horn of Africa, because obviously the situation there, that's sort of where we're sort of not shifting the focus, but sort of raising the awareness there as well.
It's great you guys are doing that. Now, Derrick, you have had a personal experience with malaria multiple times, I believe.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm originally from Ghana, West Africa, which you mentioned earlier, and I also am somehow connected to the same person that you mentioned who was on that trip and who passed away. And I can say, I've had malaria, I think, 3 or 4 times. The last time I had it, I was in college, and I was doing a program back home, and I was actually taking the malaria prophylaxis. That's what people a lot of times ask. Well, if you just give people the medicine, then they won't get malaria. But the medicine is quite expensive, and it's not a guarantee, because the way malaria works is if the parasites that are carried by the mosquito build up in your system, you can still get sick. So without missing a single pill, I was doing things or hanging out in an area where there happened to be a lot of mosquitoes. I got bitten a lot, and I got really ill. And I didn't know what was happening at first, even though I'd had it as a kid. I was just doing my thing, and then started to get these chills on a road trip, and I thought it's because the windows were open. I asked everyone to shut the windows. They were all pissed off because it was just me who was cold. And then we got to the hotel, and I was like, it's cool. Everyone's going out. I'm just going to take a nap. And they're like, you don't look so good, you don't look so good. And I'm like, I'm fine, I'm fine. And I woke up the next morning like shaking. And they took me immediately to the hospital, and I spent the next 3 days with an IV in my arm. Now, after I recovered, about a few weeks later, I started to feel symptoms again, and I went straight to the hospital, got some more additional prophylaxis, and I got better again. And I think one of the things that people don't think about malaria is that, in a way, it's like a chronic disease, right? Yeah. And what it does is it doesn't simply kill people. Like it does kill people. It kills a lot of people. I think 1 million children every year die of malaria. Malaria is a bigger killer than AIDS, and we don't talk about it enough. But the other thing that it does is for those who have to live with malaria, it is a major drag on your opportunity, on your lifestyle, on families, on productivity, because it just slows you down and it makes it hard to do anything. So I got involved with the UN Foundation Social Media Envoy campaign last year with the #EndMalaria campaign, with a vision to raising awareness of people so that we could realize that for $10 you could buy a bed net that will cover a family of 4 and last for 3 years, and that is non-toxic and literally will save lives and help empower people to do more for themselves. And additionally, to let people know things like, you know, how many of you are aware that malaria was endemic in the Carolinas in the United States? Right? Very few. But if you were growing up 100 years ago or even 60 years ago in the Carolinas, malaria was a big problem. And no one thinks about it anymore because it is an ailment that can be eradicated. And that's why what we're trying to raise awareness about.
Yep. We have a question that has come in from Facebook for Mandy. Mandy, I've been to countries before where they have malaria and was prescribed medication to prevent it. Why can't people in Africa just take medicine?
Well, I think what you just mentioned, the medication is very expensive, especially for many Africans that are living on less than $1 a day. And I think the medication is mainly sort of prescribed for short-term use, and it's not really a viable long-term solution.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another question from Facebook that's come in. Derrick, are bed nets the only way to prevent malaria? If not, what are some of the other ways?
Great question. So there are lots of ways to prevent malaria. I mean, the easiest and most obvious is if you don't have a lot of standing water around, then you're not going to have the accumulation of mosquitoes and therefore the opportunity for people to become infected. The problem is that takes a lot of energy and it's an infrastructural issue that needs to be addressed. There's also treatment for malaria once you get it, but the best way to address it, or the most cost-effective, is prevention. And that's why we're promoting the Bed Nets campaign. It's not to be a substitute for these other things, but it's something that can have a real impact on people's lives right now, even as more solutions are targeted in different countries.
So we're here, Mashable, huge partner, talking about social media. Both of you are great media personalities, public figures. How are you using your own social media channels to spread the word?
Well,
You do a much better job than I do.
Well, I'm really lucky to be part of the Social Media Envoy campaign. And we basically have...
Can you tell people a little more actually about what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is a special envoy for malaria appointed by the UN, and it's Ray Chambers. And he's an amazing man, very, very successful in business, became a philanthropist, and made a commitment to work towards the eradication of malaria. Well, this idea was created that, well, what if you had a number of social media mavens, activists, entrepreneurs, creatives, just different people. You know, everyone from Shaquille O'Neal to Ryan Seacrest is a part of it. And basically ask them to leverage their networks to get more people thinking and talking about this issue. And so for about 1.5 years almost, since World Malaria Day in 2010, we've been actively tweeting. And I mean, within the first few months, through our actions, we raised enough awareness that the World Bank committed, I think, something like $200 million to malaria eradication. So, you know, some people will say, oh, social media activism, it's like, you know, not that hot, doesn't really make an impact. I can say for sure that in our experience, we have made an impact, and hopefully will continue to do so.
That's great.
And in my own little small way, I sort of use whatever platform I have because of my job and what that sort of allowed me, be it Twitter, Facebook, and just keeping people up to date with some of the things that I'm involved with. Obviously, tweeting about today's events and, you know, my trip to Cameroon. And I think, you know, it's hard to shock people, but when you have such startling statistics like every 45 seconds a child dies of malaria, those are the sorts of things that when I first heard I was bowled over by. And I think those are important, even just little tidbits of information and facts to sort of get out there that can be retweeted if you know, by your friends and so on and so forth. It's just about keeping the dialogue going and keeping it top of mind for people.
Absolutely. So I also want to make sure that we can take questions from the crowd also. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to raise a hand and we'll make sure to get to those also. I don't know if we have a microphone or something that we're throwing around, or you can just be really loud.
Are they purchased on site?
Yes. So the question for everyone who's watching on the live stream is, does the purchase of bed nets actually create jobs in Africa and kind of fuel the distribution channel? Is that creating jobs for the long term? Is that?
So, I would like to jump on that. So one of the things, I'll take it from two aspects. One of which is that in that $10 that a person uses to buy the bed net, it's not just the cost of the net, but actually the cost of distribution and the cost of education. So you actually do have people working on the ground in doing distribution and doing the education. Where I think the greater economic opportunity comes, because I think your point is really well taken. A lot of times we talk about situations in the developing world and we think about them from a charitable perspective, but one of the things that's really key is creating sustainable opportunities for people to build themselves. And that's kind of what I was getting at about the drag on productivity of an ailment like malaria, because what winds up happening is if you address malaria concern in a given community, everything else, whether people are involved in agriculture, whether they're involved in civil service, whether they're involved in technology, because it's not just poor people that are impacted, everything else rises up because people are better able to fulfill their lives. So I think it has a double bottom line benefit, or triple bottom line benefit. On the one hand, yes, you prevent somebody from losing their life. On the other hand, yes, you have people on the ground having the opportunity to do education and distribution. And on the third, you actually are enhancing whatever else may be happening by giving people their lives back.
By the way, I'm seeing a lot of shout outs on the stream for our nifty shirts.
Buzzkill.
Oh, our Buzzkill shirts.
Buzzkill.
About the Buzzkill shirt.
One thing you mentioned with the Malaria Envoy is you can actually get hundreds of millions of people talking about a topic all at once, and you can actually start to see topics like malaria trending on Twitter. Do you see that often, that kind of world global issues are actually trending on social media, and how can we make that happen more often?
I mean, I definitely think we do need to do a better job engaging people, and specifically youth, our generation, talking about global health issues. I mean, what we're doing today, I think, is a great way to participate in that. I mean, there's so many ways to go about it. I was thinking about this on the way over here, and maybe there needs to be more of a push in schools as well. Like, you mentioned something, I don't know, somebody was talking about that upstairs before we got down here as well, and maybe there needs to be classes and courses in high school, and that's a way to sort of open up the dialogue and the discussion in terms of global health issues. I don't know, that was one way.
I'm curious, how did you get involved with the trip to Cameroon?
Well, because I had the experience of going to the Central African Republic with Nothing But Nets. It was sort of, I don't know, it was an extension of that trip in a way, because it was a similar campaign. But it was through the work that I had been doing with PSI previously.
And I know that there's a trend now towards kind of activism in tourism also, and so maybe there's something more that people can do to go on trips like that.
Yeah, I think there's a friend of mine actually runs an estate in Jamaica which if any of you guys want to go on vacation in Jamaica, let me know. I'll send you her contact info. But it's amazing what they do because they sponsor a local school. And so people come in to have this like swanky vacation and they put them to work in an organic garden and they grow all of these crops that help to feed the children because they saw that a lot of those kids were going to school and they were hungry and they couldn't learn. And they're seeing a marked difference not only in, the kids' nutrition, but also in their academic results. So I think that there are ways in which people can go to a community and not just, go and see the animals, which are very cute, very lovely, you'll see them on TV, but to really engage with the people and to find how the people live. Don't just go on the cruise ship and go through the circle of stores that you're supposed to visit and then get back on the boat, but actually find ways of getting engaged. And maybe that is something that, I think it's rising up. I think it's something that can be encouraged.
Absolutely. By the way, shout out to Nicole, who's excited that we answered her question. So right on, Nicole. I think you touched on this before, but are insecticide-treated nets harmful to people?
That's a great question. So the treated nets that we're talking about are actually, let me actually go back on that. So part of the way in which malaria was eradicated in the United States was through significant use of DDT, right? And as many of you know, DDT has got profound problems with it. And so one of the things that makes this campaign special is that the treated nets in this case are actually, the WHO has stated that these are safe. I mean, that was one of the considerations. And so in this generation, we're engaging in a solution without creating an additional problem. And I think that's one of the things that people can feel comfortable about in getting involved.
This is kind of a political question, I guess. We have someone on Twitter saying, my question, in this economy, why should we be focusing on malaria and global health?
Oh, you want me?
Yeah.
Well, since you want to get into politics, one of the things that happens worldwide is when you ask people, like, where should we cut? We have issues. We have to get rid of our deficits, whether it's here, Europe, wherever. Where should we cut funding? They say, cut foreign aid. Yeah. The foreign aid is a small fraction of the money that we spend in our budgets. However, one of the things that people are also not aware of is a lot of these emerging economies, a lot of these developing countries are really where the opportunity is. If you look at the top 12 fastest growing economies in the world right now, 5 of them are in Africa. The fastest growing economy in the world in quarters 1 and 2 of this year was my home country of Ghana. And what happens is if countries like the United States say, we don't care, we're too busy fighting amongst ourselves, we're not going to be involved in those other places, then other nations step into the breach because it's not about charity, it's about opportunity. What you find in Africa, for example, is that China has taken a much more dominant role as countries in the West have sort of stepped back. So what I would say is when we think about investing in the public health challenges of other peoples, we're actually investing in goodwill and in relationships that can be really, really beneficial down the road. Look at our relationship with a country like Singapore or a country like Korea. Now it's guaranteed their first world. 50 years ago, that wasn't the case. We should be investing in those same relationships with Ghana and Nigeria and nations of that sort that will be leaders in the future.
So come talk to Derrick if you want to be in a political debate or if you want to go to Jamaica.
Absolutely.
And by the way, you have about 5 people on Twitter who want to take you up on your offer to travel to Jamaica. So be careful what you ask for. So Mandy, I'm really curious. You said you looked under the hood and you saw all the different things. I know that there's a lot of skepticism sometimes when you talk about net distribution. Are the people actually using the nets? Or are they just giving them away? What did you see that surprised you, and are people actually using these nets?
Yes, I mean, fortunately, and the experiences that I've had, the results are tangible and they're measurable and hopefully sustainable. Like Derrick mentioned, education is a huge part of the distribution component. It's not just the $10, like you said, that goes towards procuring the net. It's also about the actual cost for the distribution and the cost for education. For these particular distributions, there are community-based health workers that before, during, and after a distribution will be sort of assigned in their community to help families, to be there to answer questions and really to relay to them why it's important for them to use the net, how to use the net, and how it prevents them and their families from getting sick.
And so if someone does get sick, I mean, you were lucky, you got treated multiple times for malaria, but I'm wondering, so I guess malaria obviously is treatable, but
yes.
You need to catch it. What are the symptoms? How is it treated?
So I can say from, my experience with the symptoms, it's like getting the flu, but then it gets worse. It can include, shakes, vomiting, things like that. For me, it was like almost moving towards convulsions. And it also makes you very weak and very lethargic. So it's not just me who's had malaria, by the way. Like, I have family members who've had malaria. I have family members who've died of malaria. It's something that people in West Africa just live with. It's, you talk to somebody like, oh my God, I got the flu, I was out of work. Like, oh my God, I got malaria. I mean, it literally, it's like that. And a lot of my friends out here are stunned because they look at me, they hear me, they're like, oh, he's from Brooklyn, whatever, malaria, how could that be connected to you? But I'm from another country where it matters. And so the thing that happens is if you have access to good health care, you can actually go in for a treatment and they will virtually flood your system with what you call prophylaxis, like the medicine that kills the parasites, and you will get better. But if you don't have access to treatment, it can kill you. And if it doesn't kill you, it kind of just puts you out of commission. If you see somebody who has malaria, like, it's not necessarily that they're all up in a hospital with the gas mask on or whatever. Like, you'll sometimes just see them like this. And so that's why we're saying prevention is such a critical part of it. Because if it's preventable, you have an opportunity to better fulfill other opportunities in your lives, which help people to build their communities and hopefully have enough resources to deal with the infrastructural problems so you don't have that standing water and you start to look more like South Carolina where there isn't a malaria problem.
All right, we have time for a few more questions. Question.
Hi, my name's Amanda, and I'm from Johnson Incorporated. And I was curious if, since we're all interested in technology, if you could speak to how technology is being used in the distribution system, if there are ways that we're using technology and new ways to better target where FedNets need to be and where there's a great need.
That's great. I know there's some folks here from Nothing But Nets and PSI who can maybe talk to that
Yeah, I'm
a
like,
little bit more.
can we phone a friend with this?
Yeah, I know, right? I'm like,
Yeah, these are.
Because I am not
People
equipped to answer
these are
that
like
necessarily.
Tough questions coming on the
No, no,
live
no,
stream.
it's
Take no
that's
prisoners.
a very understandable question. Anybody from the UN Foundation? Google Maps. Ah, okay. Yes, we were talking about the power of SMS texting on the continent of Africa and how big that is. But that's a huge part of, like, I know the census gathering that they were doing for Cameroon.
Is there?
Some old school technology like donkeys and canoes to deliver nets as well. So it's old and new technology. Nothing beats a donkey.
The best of both worlds, as he was just saying, canoes and donkeys are sort of a part of the distribution stream as well, whatever it takes to get the nets to the people that need the most.
So speaking of, yes, question.
Obviously, nets develop holes over a period of time. I was wondering what is the average life expectancy of a net? How long people expect to get them?
That was a great question from my mom in the second row, by the way.
I think these nets they last up to 3 years. They're long-lasting insecticide-treated nets. At this point, they last up to 3 years.
And I think this is a good opportunity for us to actually take the net out and show people what it looks like. And because some people don't know, you can actually fit an entire family of 4 under one net. This is the demo section.
so I guess we could stand up and show you.
You actually have to air the net out for 24 hours, right, before you can sleep under it.
And so the idea is that this can cover a family of 4 And part of the training is for people to know to use the bed net on a regular basis. And you'll go into homes and you'll find these just hanging from the bed. And you go in, it can actually be something of a fashion statement. I mean, you get in there, it's all cozy. And this right here is a simple thing, but a major part of the solution.
Yep. You tuck it in wherever you're sleeping, whether it's on the floor or if it's like sort of a raised platform bed. These little ties you sort of use to tie either on top of the bed if there's some sort of like holes or off of the ceiling. There you go. Lovely.
It's actually pretty amazing that we're, on one hand we're talking about so many high-tech ways to solve a problem, and then on the other end there's such an easy solution. So again, we're running low on questions, but thank you so much for everyone who's participating in the stream. I know that you have people who want to take you up on a political debate on the way to Jamaica now.
I think there's still some people in the audience.
Oh, there are a few questions in the audience. All right.
I just wonder what this group is doing to engage. So my family has a small nonprofit in Ghana that helped to build a school in Elmina. Cool. And since we've been involved there for the past 7 years, there are so many groups doing so many different kinds of work. So you have the ear of the UN. Are you working with small partners on the ground in different countries like Ghana?
That's a great question. I mean,
I know the work that PSI does, the organization that I work with. Partnership is key, and partnership is key especially with an issue like malaria. Specifically on the ground, I mean, whether it's UNICEF or, oh my gosh, any other number of partners, absolutely. I mean, I think that sort of synergy is what makes the progress that's sort of come forth with this particular issue possible.
I mean, these are great questions coming in. I would really encourage the people who are working for Nothing But Nets, PSI, UN Foundation to, if they can, to actually join in the conversation and post answers to some of these questions in the stream too. One more question from the audience.
I just have a general question, just learning about this now. What do people do when they're not sleeping? Like, I feel like when
It's a good question.
Yeah, it's a great question.
Yeah. This is a really great question. So you tend to have...
Let me repeat it for the live stream to anyone.
For sure.
The question is, what do people do when they are not sleeping, assuming they are not using the bed net as a toga?
Yeah, right. So there are two things to keep in mind. Like, one is that when you're awake, you can more easily avoid places where you see a lot of mosquitoes, right? Secondly, the mosquitoes tend to come out at certain times. They may not be out in the middle of the day when the sun is shining and it's cooler at night. That might be a time when they're more readily there. And thirdly, imagine what you do when you hear something buzzing around here. Bzz, you're going to kill it, and the mosquitoes will try to evade, etc. What happens is when you're sleeping, you're a sitting duck. And so it's at that time, like, I can't tell you how many mosquito bites I've woken up with in my lifetime, right? So that's why you find people have a vulnerability. And if you can protect them during the time when they're sleeping, you actually give them a much, much better chance of not getting sick.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Thanks to everyone in the audience. Thanks for everyone on the live stream. Thank you to Derrick and Mandy. I know I've learned a lot about malaria today. I hope that everyone has as well. Can you quickly just say where people can follow you on social media to learn more?
Absolutely. You can check me out at twitter.com/Ashong, at Ashong, ASHONG.
And I'm at the Mandy Moore, but I would also encourage everyone here to log on to nothingbutnets.net just to learn more information, but also to send a net and save a life. Cameroon, Horn of Africa.
Perfect.
Yes.
And thank you guys so much for taking the time today.
Thank you guys.